Born from an alliance of worlds who joined together to oppose a mighty empire, the United Federation of Planets rose to become one of 4 great superpowers who most influenced their region of the Alpha and Beta Quadrants. After centuries of intermittent periods of war between the Federation, Romulans, Klingons, and Cardassians, borders were established and long stretches of peace maintained, though much of the animosity between their species continued. These years of peace were largely kept through an alliance between the Federation and Klingons. However, their drastically divergent cultures and core values sometimes exposed the relationship as more fragile than many might believe. Nevertheless, by the late 24th century, no single power in the Alpha or Beta Quadrants could realistically challenge the authority of the Federation-Klingon alliance. However, the uneasy peace of the 4 superpowers did little to protect those outside their borders, and so expansionist and militaristic cultures like the Cardassians continued to invade and capture resource-rich planets, resulting in terrible conflicts such as the 50-year occupation of Bajor. Yet despite the seemingly overwhelming military might of the Cardassians, the Bajorans refused to accept subjugation, launching decades of rebellion and terrorist attacks, until the invaders at last pulled their forces from the region, allowing Bajor to organize a united government and join the interstellar community as an independent power. To aid them in their recovery, Bajor developed a friendship with the Federation and eventually petitioned for membership, with a Starfleet crew given permission to man Deep Space Nine, a nearby space station built and operated by the Cardassians during the occupation. And while the Federation's relationship with this planet may have seemed a small detail in the larger scope of quadrant politics, everything changed in 2369 when the Federation discovered a stable wormhole to the Gamma Quadrant in Bajoran space. To the deeply religious people of Bajor, this event represented the opening of the Celestial Temple, which according to ancient legends was where their gods, the prophets, resided. And as if to confirm their beliefs, it was discovered by Commander Benjamin Sisko of Deep Space Nine that the wormhole was indeed home to mysterious extra-dimensional aliens who chose him to be their emissary and spoke abstractly about being of Bajor. Yet few outside this region of space cared about the existence of non-corporeal wormhole aliens, as most others were instead focused on the potential of having a gateway into the Gamma Quadrant, with ships now able to travel 70,000 light-years away in mere moments. As might be expected, many began to explore this faraway region of space, such as the Bajorans who quickly established colonies, and the Ferengi who began forging trade relationships with newly encountered species. Yet it was not long before these travelers started to hear rumors about a mighty superpower known as the Dominion, said to rule large portions of the Gamma Quadrant, and who did not appreciate seeing unfamiliar ships flying through their space. As the Dominion threat grew larger, the Federation learned that they were ruled by changelings, a species of highly intelligent and technologically advanced non-humanoid shapeshifters. More formally known as the Founders, these beings were revered as gods by 2 genetically engineered species they helped create, using the Vorta to administer their holdings, while the Jem'Hadar fought their wars. Free from the responsibility of running the day-to-day operations of the Dominion, the Founders were able to remain on their home planet, engaged in the Great Link, a process unique to their species where individuals could join together in a vast sea of interconnected thoughts and feelings. Yet despite the Founders' complete disinterest in actually being a part of the interstellar community, they were ruthless in eliminating any possible opposition against them, as they held deep resentment against the solid species of the galaxy, who in the past hunted their kind and threatened their very survival. And so in order to protect their people, they settled on a hidden planet and used their intellect to breed 2 subservient species, which helped them conquer their region of space, thereby eliminating any possible threat to their continued survival. And so when they discovered that a wormhole had opened connecting them to the Alpha Quadrant, they once again believed themselves threatened by unfamiliar solids, and so by 2370, they began to deal with these outsiders, destroying a Federation ship and quickly sending a message to the Alpha Quadrant that they were on the brink of war. However, the Founders had a great deal of experience with conquering other species, and so began their invasion not by sending armies through the wormhole, but by sending spies and infiltrators in order to destabilize the region before the outbreak of open war. Unfortunately for the Alpha and Beta Quadrants, the Founders were expert shapeshifters and could take the form of just about anyone, allowing them to replace prominent political or military figures and reap chaos across the region. One such infiltrator replaced Colonel Lavok of the Romulan espionage agency, the Tal Shiar, which then allowed him to forge an alliance with Enabran Tain, the ex-head of the Cardassian espionage agency, the Obsidian Order, who wanted to launch a preemptive strike against the Dominion, believing that if they could destroy the Founders' homeworld, a larger war might be averted. Launching their mission without consent from the Cardassian or Romulan governments, they flew a small cloaked fleet into the Gamma Quadrant and engaged in the Battle of the Omarian Nebula. However, with the infiltrator reporting all their plans to the Dominion, the battle was a massacre, with an armada of Jem'Hadar waiting for them, destroying all but one of their ships. Through this deception, the Dominion were able to present themselves as the aggrieved victims of an unprovoked attack, while also crippling 2 enemy spy agencies and damaging the reputation of their governments. These events then had larger ramifications, as it led to the fall of the Obsidian Order, allowing for Military Central Command to take full power within the Cardassian Union. This in turn led an ever-growing dissident movement to stage a coup and establish a new civilian government under the Detapa Council. Unfortunately, matters only grew worse for the Cardassians, as they struggled to stabilize their own government, while also fighting a war against the insurgent Maquis, who wanted to liberate their home planets in the Badlands. Capitalizing on their weakened state, another Dominion infiltrator, this time posing as General Martok, manipulated the Klingon Empire into launching an unprovoked attack against the Cardassian Union, justifying their actions by claiming that the recent change in government may have been a Dominion plot to take control of an Alpha Quadrant power. This then put a severe strain on their alliance with the Federation, who was working through their own internal struggles, as a terrorist attack against Earth led a faction of Starfleet to attempt their own coup against the government, believing them too weak to fight this kind of war. Nevertheless, the Federation tried to remain true to their principles, condemning the actions of the Klingon government, which infuriated Chancellor Gowron, prompting him to end their alliance, which eventually led to war between these powers. As a result of their scheming and manipulations, by 2373, the Dominion had successfully accomplished many of their early goals, signing non-aggression treaties with the Tholians, the Miradorn, the Bajorans, and the Romulans, while the Cardassians were weakened from political instability and invasion, the Klingons weakened by fighting on 2 fronts, and the Federation weakened by being at war with a former ally. As was pointed out by Benjamin Sisko, the powers of the Alpha Quadrant were clearly losing the peace against the Dominion, and so a war might be their only hope. Severely weakened from years of civil strife, Maquis rebellion, and war with the Klingons, by 2373 the Cardassian Union was reduced to a third-rate power, unable to defend their borders and by some accounts even suffering food shortages on their homeworld. In addition, due to their proximity to the Bajoran wormhole, it was entirely possible they might become the first major target of a Dominion invasion fleet when they began their inevitable war for the Alpha Quadrant. Deciding that something drastic needed to be done, Gul Dukat, a prominent figure in Cardassian politics, with connections both to the military and civilian factions of their government, overthrew the Detapa Council by negotiating a deal to voluntarily bring the Cardassian Union into the Dominion. This mutually beneficial arrangement would leave Gul Dukat as the unchallenged ruler of the Cardassian people, while the Dominion gained a much-needed foothold in the region from where they might launch a full-scale invasion of the Alpha Quadrant. At first, this relationship proved beneficial, as Dominion reinforcements allowed the Cardassian Union to finally crush the Maquis rebellion and recapture all territories lost to the Klingon Empire. In addition, the Dominion brought food and necessary supplies, with many believing that at last their years of scarcity and hardship were at an end. Meanwhile, after being swiftly defeated by Dominion forces, Chancellor Gowron was ready to retreat into Klingon space and prepare for a fight to the death, but was instead convinced by Benjamin Sisko of Deep Space Nine to re-sign the Khitomer Accords, and once again ally with the Federation to face the approaching threat together. Although war had not yet been officially declared, the Federation-Klingon alliance was determined to prevent the arrival of more Dominion reinforcements from the Gamma Quadrant. However, their initial plan to collapse the wormhole was sabotaged by a changeling infiltrator posing as Dr. Julian Bashir aboard DS-9. Fortunately, the deception was eventually revealed and the enemy agent destroyed when a number of prisoners, including the real Dr. Bashir and General Martok of the Klingon Empire, escaped a Dominion penal colony and returned to the Alpha Quadrant. Still needing to stop ships from coming through the wormhole, the Federation Alliance came up with a plan to litter the area with self-replicating mines, fully aware this would be seen as a hostile action and provocation. And so began the Dominion War, with Gul Dukat alongside Weyun of the Vorta overseeing Dominion forces, beginning with an invasion fleet sent to capture Deep Space Nine so they might destroy the minefield. Opposing this invasion would be the Federation, whose forces were led by Admiral William Ross, and the Klingon Empire, whose warriors followed General Martok. Realizing they were unlikely to win the opening battle at Deep Space Nine, the Federation Alliance decided not to defend their position, instead hurrying to finish placing the minefield around the wormhole, and abandoning the station, arranging for the computer system to be sabotaged before the arrival of enemy forces. Then, with the invasion fleet distracted at Deep Space Nine, the Federation Alliance sent their ships to destroy enemy shipyards at Tauros 3, thereby making it a costly victory for the Dominion. As the war escalated further, the Dominion quickly found themselves in the superior position, winning the vast majority of early confrontations, including their victory in the Tyra system against the 7th Fleet, destroying 98 out of 112 enemy ships. Fortunately for the Federation Alliance, their minefield was proving difficult to dismantle, and so no new enemy reinforcements could arrive. In addition, the Alliance found some success in smaller-scale confrontations, successfully destroying individual shipyards and Ketracel White facilities. Eventually, this led to a shortage that threatened to destabilize Dominion forces, as Jem'Hadar warriors were known to go mad without the white. Nevertheless, the Dominion were largely winning the war, as the Federation Alliance was constantly pushed further back into their own territory. In desperate need of a significant victory, and knowing that the minefield was all that kept Dominion reinforcements from flooding into the Alpha Quadrant, Benjamin Sisko, recently promoted to adjutant to Admiral Ross, organized Operation Return, gathering a Federation Klingon armada to retake Deep Space Nine. Unfortunately, Chancellor Gowron was hesitant to commit so many of their ships to a single engagement, and so Sisko sent Commander Worf and General Martok to convince him to send his forces. However, as the fleet was gathering, Sisko received a message from trusted friends who had formed an Alliance resistance cell on Deep Space Nine, informing him that the Dominion were days away from destroying the minefield, which would mean thousands of new ships brought in to join their war effort. Believing they could not wait for the rest of the armada to assemble, Sisko led nearly 700 Federation ships into the battle, determined to do whatever it took to stop those reinforcements from coming through the wormhole. Although they fought well, the Federation was badly outnumbered and defeat was all but assured, if not for the late arrival of the Klingon fleet, which allowed Benjamin Sisko aboard the Defiant to pass through an opening in the enemy line. Much to their disappointment, the crew soon learned that they were too late and that the minefield was destroyed. However, Sisko refused to retreat, instead ordering his ship to fly directly into the wormhole, where the Defiant would await the 2,800 Dominion ships coming through from the other side, in a desperate last stand to eliminate as many enemy vessels as possible before they passed into the Alpha Quadrant. However, due to the special relationship between the non-corporeal aliens known as the Prophets and their emissary Benjamin Sisko, he received a vision while inside the wormhole. When the Prophets made it clear they could not allow the Sisko to die, he convinced them to intercede on his behalf, causing all Dominion reinforcements to instantly vanish, and would prevent any future enemy ships from passing through the wormhole. Shocked and utterly perplexed at the loss of their reinforcements, on whom they were depending to win the battle, the Dominion quickly abandoned Deep Space Nine and retreated into Cardassian space. All except Gul Dukat, who suffered a nervous breakdown after unexpectedly losing the battle and watching his second-in-command, Damar, kill his daughter Zayal after she admitted to working with the enemy. With Gul Dukat captured by the Federation, his second-in-command, Damar, was promoted to Legate, becoming leader of the Cardassian Union. However, with the initial Cardassian plan for the war failing, Damar was given far less operational control than his predecessor, becoming a mere puppet of the Dominion. Meanwhile, as casualties continued to mount, Dr. Julian Bashir of Deep Space Nine started a program to help a group of brilliant, genetically engineered people with social disorders create a think tank that analyzed information about the war so they might make helpful recommendations to Starfleet. At first, the effort proved successful, with the think tank determining that a generous peace proposal sent by the Dominion was actually a tactic so they could hold on to the Cabrel system, a necessary source of Ketracel White for their Jem'Hadar army. Yet as the think tank continued to study the war, they came to what they considered was the inescapable conclusion that the Dominion would successfully conquer the Alpha Quadrant. Believing there was no way around this conclusion, Dr. Bashir recommended that the Federation Alliance should surrender in order to save the lives of the billions of people who would die in a prolonged struggle. Outraged by their proposal, the Federation rejected the idea and soon disbanded the think tank after Dr. Bashir discovered the others were planning to outright aid the Dominion and hasten their victory in order to keep casualties to a minimum. As the war continued, the Dominion allied themselves with the Orion Syndicate, working with the criminal organization to plot the assassination of a Klingon ambassador in order to destabilize the Federation Alliance. But the plan was ultimately exposed by Miles O'Brien, a Starfleet officer undercover with the Syndicate. Having lost access to their reinforcements beyond the wormhole, the Dominion created a new generation of Jem'Hadar warriors, bred specifically for combat in the Alpha Quadrant, and were able to maintain this new army by allying with the Sona, who took over production of Ketracel White, finally ending the supply shortage. Slowly, the Dominion expanded their influence, seeking out every available advantage, while continuing to press the attack against the Federation. As a result, they were once again winning the war, and so in 2374, the Dominion conquered Beta Z in under 10 hours, gaining a strategic foothold in the heart of enemy space, from where they might launch attacks against important Federation targets, like Vulcan, Andor, Tellar, and Alpha Centauri. Desperate to stop the Dominion from continuing their advance, Captain Benjamin Sisko put morality and Federation principles aside to work with Elim Garak, a former Cardassian spy living in exile on DS9. Together, they hired a criminal to forge a recording of the Vorta Wayun discussing the invasion of Romulus and presented it to Vreenek, an influential Romulan senator, as evidence that the Dominion were preparing to violate the non-aggression treaty. And while the plan failed and the forgery was discovered, the entire ordeal proved to only be a distraction so that Garak could plant explosives on the Romulan ship and assassinate the senator when he departed. Although Sisko was furious, having been kept in the dark about Garak's true intentions, the former spy explained that the Romulans would soon launch an investigation, and amongst the wreckage of the senator's ship would discover the recording they created of a high-level Dominion meeting. At this point, any problem with the recording could be attributed to the explosion, leaving the Romulan government to conclude that Vreenek was killed by the Dominion after discovering their plans to invade the Star Empire. Sisko was then upset further when he learned Garak also killed the criminal who made the forgery in order to cover up their involvement. But in the end, the Cardassian exile was proved correct, with the Romulans declaring war on the Dominion and joining the Federation alliance. Although he felt guilty about what had occurred, Sisko decided that he could live with what he did. As Garak so eloquently stated, "That's why you came to me, isn't it, Captain? Because you knew I could do those things that you weren't capable of doing. Well, it worked, and you'll get what you wanted, a war between the Romulans and the Dominion. And if your conscience is bothering you, you should soothe it with the knowledge that you may have just saved the entire Alpha Quadrant, and all it cost was the life of one Romulan senator, one criminal, and the self-respect of one Starfleet officer. I don't know about you, but I'd call that a bargain." Quickly, the Romulans proved effective allies, striking 15 bases along the Cardassian border and driving the Dominion off Benzar. It was during these campaigns that a unique young Romulan slave known as Shinzon distinguished himself as a great military leader, defeating the Jem'Hadar in 12 engagements. Shinzon was originally created by the Romulan government as a human clone of Jean-Luc Picard in order to replace the prominent Federation captain. However, the plan was eventually abandoned, and so the clone was discarded and sent to live as a slave. With the Federation alliance revitalized, they went on the offensive, successfully invading Cardassian space in the First Battle of Chintaka. However, this proved a difficult region to defend, and as the war intensified, heavy fighting along the front lines resulted in battles like the failed assault on Monarch 4, where the Klingons lost 30% of their fleet, or the siege of AR-558, where 147 Federation soldiers were sent to defend a subspace communications array, but due to manpower shortages, there were no reinforcements for 5 months, leaving only 43 of them alive to hold the line. Despite their significant losses, the Alliance successfully capitalized on their momentum, with small, hard-fought victories mounting together, like their capture of the Kalandra system, thanks to the efforts of Elim Garak, who was now openly aiding the Federation, hoping to help free the Cardassian people from their Gamma Quadrant oppressors. The Dominion then faced further challenges, learning that their leaders had contracted a new morphogenic virus that threatened to destroy the Founders. But what they did not know was that this illness was actually a weapon of war created by Section 31, a rogue intelligence agency working on behalf of the Federation without any oversight or official approval. As the war dragged on, fluctuating between minor Dominion advances to more of a stalemate, the Founders grew frustrated and sought out new allies, identifying the Breen Confederacy as a strong warrior species capable of bringing them victory. The Dominion may even have sent an infiltrator to replace an influential person in their society in order to convince them to enter the war. After months of secret communications, Thoth Gore of the Breen Confederacy traveled to Cardassian space and signed a treaty of alliance. Yet with the Dominion desperate to gain their support, the Breen were able to demand a great deal in return, annexing a number of Cardassian planets, with an added promise of controlling Earth and Romulus once the war was won. Determined to strike fear into the heart of the Federation, the Breen began by organizing a direct attack against Earth, targeting Starfleet headquarters. Although most of their ships were lost in battle, Thought Gore remarked that it was a small price to pay for such a great victory. The Breen then engaged in the Second Battle of Chintaka, using energy-dampening weapons to drain enemy ships of power so they might be easily destroyed. Although many Alliance vessels were lost, a single Klingon ship survived, as their engineer had made an adjustment to the warp core, which unintentionally made them immune to the Breen weapon. General Martok then ordered all his ships to make similar adjustments, leaving the Empire to stand alone against the Dominion, while their allies upgraded their vessels to withstand this new technology. Unfortunately, it was at this most critical time that Chancellor Gowron of the Klingon Empire chose to play politics, purposefully sending Martok on missions doomed to fail, as he feared the general's growing reputation amongst their people. Although the general was so loyal, he was willing to die for the Empire, even on a mission he knew was foolish. Lieutenant Commander Worf of Starfleet, who was also a member of the House of Martok, refused to accept the situation, engaging Gowron in a fight to the death. And while Worf was victorious, and might have claimed leadership over the Empire, he instead insisted that Martok take the position, allowing them to once again focus on the war. With the Breen given charge over much of the invasion effort, the Dominion once again began to make advances. Yet all was not well within the Dominion alliance, as the Cardassian people continued to suffer heavy losses in blood and treasure, while also losing influence and territory. A true patriot, Legate Damar was furious with the generous terms given to the Breen, having been forced to sign a document allowing for the annexation of Cardassian planets to their new allies. And so he grew increasingly depressed and angry, drinking to numb the pain of his people's humiliation. Yet when he was at his lowest, he reconnected with his old commander Dukat, who reminded him of what a courageous warrior he once was, telling him to take control of his life and become the leader the Cardassian people needed. After hearing his old friend's words, Damar finally had enough of being a Dominion puppet, gathering together his most trusted allies to form the Cardassian Liberation Front, determined to win back his people's independence. The rebellion launched several successful attacks, including the destruction of the last Dominion cloning facility in the Alpha Quadrant on Rondak 3, and even reached out to the Federation for an alliance against their shared enemy. Unfortunately, the movement was eventually betrayed and their forces massacred, but they served a useful purpose in the overall war effort, as they distracted the Dominion long enough for the Federation Alliance to upgrade their ships to fight against the Breen. With their advantage lost, the Dominion accepted that this war would be a prolonged struggle, and so pulled back all forces into Cardassian space, returning the galaxy to pre-war borders. However, this was merely a tactical withdrawal, designed to shorten their supply lines while extending those of the enemy, and giving them a smaller area to keep secure, so they could focus on growing their army and fleet. Realizing that this situation benefited the Dominion, the Federation Alliance chose to launch a final assault into the heart of Cardassian space in order to end the war once and for all. Despite the resolve of the Alliance, the Breen, Jem'Hadar, and Cardassians stood an excellent chance of winning the battle, if not for the continued interference of Damar, who had survived the destruction of the rebellion and was now rallying the citizens of Cardassia Prime against their oppressors. In response to his efforts, the Dominion unwisely chose to punish the general population, killing 2 million of their citizens in the bombing of Lakarian City. Yet rather than terrify the Cardassians into submission, it stirred them further to anger, leading to riots in the streets, and even convincing the Cardassian fleet to turn against the Breen and Jem'Hadar in the midst of the Battle of Cardassia. The unexpected attack caused chaos in the Dominion fleet, forcing them to withdraw to Cardassia Prime for their last stand. Meanwhile, Dominion headquarters came under attack, and while Damar was killed in the fighting, his forces continued on and took the building, killing Weyoun and capturing the female founder. And while she was prepared for a fight to the death, she was convinced to surrender after linking with Odo, a member of her species who had sided with the Federation, and promised that if she surrendered, he would go to the Gamma Quadrant and deliver the cure for the morphogenic virus to their people. And so in 2375, Dominion and Alliance representatives witnessed the signing of the Treaty of Bajor, bringing an end to this devastating conflict. Among the terms of this treaty, the Dominion lost all their territory in the Alpha Quadrant, leaving the Breen and Cardassians as sovereign powers once more. In addition, they agreed that the female founder would stand trial for war crimes, while all Dominion military forces promptly returned to the Gamma Quadrant. Although peace was restored and pre-war borders reinstated, the balance of power in the region had shifted significantly by the end of the conflict. Having been on the front lines for much of the fighting, the Klingon Empire was significantly weakened, though they had also gained territory, as they remained in possession of the Cardassian planets, captured before the start of the Dominion War. The Cardassian Union itself was utterly devastated, enduring most of the collateral destruction, leaving them a shell of their former self, forced to rebuild their civilization. And while the Federation and Romulan Star Empire also suffered heavy losses, they remained the most significant superpowers at the start of the post-war era. Love audiobooks? Then be sure to check out Audible, where they have the world's largest collection available. Simply sign up through the link in the description box below and get 2 free audiobooks to start out. A special thanks to all those who contribute to CivilizationEx, like Fabian Keen-Eye Flowers, Michael the Stallion Sixsmith, Tom Moonstruck Waters, and the Frostfang Tickler. If you'd like to help CivilizationEx, click on the Patreon link, and please be sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and click on the links to see more.